So for this session, I would like to introduce three presenters. Firstly, we have Meredith Mooi, who's the Systems and Technologies Manager, Information Services at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Meredith works with library and IT staff to achieve and maintain excellence in systems underpinning library services. She has over 20 years experience in library systems. She led the successful implementations of Alma, Primo and Leganto across 2015 and 16 and is now leading the Esploro implementation at USC. We also have Margaret Pembroke, who is the Library Systems and Copyright Librarian at Southern Cross University. She's been working with Alma since 2017, managing the Alma implementation and currently leads the Esploro implementation as a part of the early adopter program. So prior to moving to the systems librarian role, Margie was the manager of the institutional repository at SCU. She has over 30 years of experience in libraries and holds a Bachelor of Information Science majoring in IT from Charles Sturt University. And we also have Keely Chapman. Keely's the Coordinator Research Services Publishing. She has primary responsibility for engaging and maintaining relationships across RMIT University to manage the operations of the RMIT Open Access Research Repository. Keely is a relative newcomer to Alma-based systems. Her contributions have ensured the goals set for services offered by the RMIT Research Repository were met. She has 28 years experience and she made the leap from liaison reference librarian about 11 years ago. So for the next 50 minutes or so, they are going to lead a presentation titled A Tale of Three Cities, Tales from Three Esploro Early Adopters. So I hand it over to Meredith, Keely and Margie, and I'll sit back and enjoy the show. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. So I'll kick off first. So I'll just start to share my screen. So can everyone see that? It's good. Okay, so as Kate said, this is a presentation from the three of us describing our early adoption of Esploro. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. So for my presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about our migration. So that'll include just the scope of our project, why we chose Esploro and what we hope to achieve. But the main focus of my presentation is really about what Esploro has enabled for us, both for, I guess, the researchers particularly, but also for library staff. And then just briefly, the next steps, how we see ourselves moving on in the future. So just a bit about USC. So we're a very regional university in Australia, located on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, just an hour north of Brisbane. Prior to COVID, we were rapidly growing. Our 5th campus opened in February this year. So the COVID impact, like everywhere, has presented a lot of challenges for us. So we have about 16,000 students. We have 6 schools, 12 research centres and about 450 researchers. As Kate mentioned in the intro, we have Alma, Primo, Leganto, and now we have Esploro. So really with those products, it's allowed us to really start looking at expanding our library support and services, and particularly in the realms of research and archive collections, as well as research support. So our context was very much about manual processes for research output submission by the researchers and also management of those research outputs. Researcher profiles were completely unassociated with our repository system, and the repository system itself really represented a siloed system. So that was basically our context. So looking at the project scope, our main goal was to replace the institutional repository. And within that is looking very much at achieving workflow efficiencies and also analytics and reporting that just wasn't possible with the previous institutional repository that we had. The other thing that we were keen on was finding a system that improved the integration with other corporate and external systems. Again, something that just wasn't possible with the existing institutional repository that we had. So in terms of our decision for going with Esploro, it was very much leveraging the ALMA platform and also the library staff expertise that we had with ALMA, both within navigation, working with the tasks list, working with the permissions, and for system staff being able to easily configure that actual system. So we also had familiarity with a known vendor in Ex Libris and hoping that was going to influence it to such a degree that we would have a faster implementation. Being an early adopter obviously has its challenges, but there are also a lot of benefits there. So the discount in the financial environment that we had even way back in 2018 was very beneficial, and we also had the opportunity ongoing to influence Esploro's development. So in terms of migration, this is where I guess we've come from. So we migrated from the Vital repository system, and with its limitations, it meant that we had to duplicate data into an Access database. And the reason for that was really so we could run reports and support the university reporting for ERA and other government reporting. As you can imagine, running two systems like that with duplicated data entry meant that our workflows were very manual, extremely inefficient. So I was trying to find an image that would represent that, and there were many steps, it was convoluted, and it was something that we definitely needed to move away from. Because of those limitations, we had little opportunity for devolving work across teams. So our repository team has always, to date, consisted of 2 core team members, and they were doing the work to manage the deposits from researchers and publish those research outputs to our discovery service. As I said, there's little or no capability within Vital for any system integrations. I guess the only system integration we possibly had was the backup of the complete Access database to our data hub so that our Office of Research could actually run their reports. As I also mentioned, the researcher profile pages on the corporate website were manually created and also updated and were completely or disassociated from any of our repository systems. For researchers to actually submit their research outputs was mostly via email, and of course the research repository team also picked up research output via other methods, but everything was very much manual, siloed systems, and we definitely need to look at upgrading. So this is where we are now. So we now have Esploro, which is manifested as a research menu within ALMA. So staff are still logging into ALMA, and those with the permissions for research output management access that functionality via the ALMA menu for research. We also have the 2 discovery portals with Esploro. So that's one for research outputs, and the second is researcher profiles. For us, we've launched in July this year. At the moment, we have only made live or enabled or launched the research outputs discovery portal. And we have started working with researcher profiles to update them before we actually launch those. The researcher profile portal allows the researchers to deposit, and it also allows them to manage, create, update their researcher profiles. So they could either do that themselves, but what we've found is it's a good linkage building for our library staff to support and facilitate that for researchers who would nominate that they would like support in that area to update their profiles. And we've actually had really, really positive feedback from researchers with the new interface, the new functionality, the fact that they can do that themselves. Within ALMA Esploro, there's also mediated deposit workflows, and with both researcher deposit and the mediated deposit workflows, wherever possible, Esploro is trying to capture the data automatically, particularly when a DOI is entered. As I said, with the Vital system, we never really had any reporting capability, so Esploro has now given us quite a dashboard of analytics straight out of the box, which I'll touch upon in a bit more detail in the presentation. And again, it's an open system based on those ALMA APIs. So we have APIs for researcher records, the assets, as well as analytics. And again, touching on the early adoption, obviously there are challenges with that. Some of the functionality might not quite be there. It's a bit frustrating, but we have a product that we believe is going to develop further. We know things are coming in terms of projects, grants is going to evolve more, and in the future, research data management, things like research data management plans. So it's really, really exciting for us to be in this new environment. So to touch upon the enabling that's happened with implementing Esploro, and specifically for researchers. So as I've touched upon, the research profile portal has allowed and provided that capability for researchers to deposit, self-deposit research outputs. And it's a seamless workflow that comes straight into ALMA Esploro. So then we can pick that up and approve those research outputs for publishing. So the researchers have the opportunity to update their profiles themselves, but there's also the opportunity for them to assign a proxy. So the proxy can then deposit outputs on their behalf and also update their profiles. The researcher profile will also allow researchers to highlight any of the research outputs that they particularly want to promote. And we also have metrics. The researcher profiles also provide access to researcher identifiers. So there's linkages to ORCID and the Scopus IDs, and of course the global exposure. So we're actually publishing to Google Scholar, and we'll eventually be pushing those research assets to BASE, ORCID, etc. So this just gives you a bit of a snapshots and screenshots of two of our researchers. So you can see there's a quick summary of the research topics, the research institute or the research centre that they belong to. And with their research outputs, we can see that it's filtered such in a similar way that Primo and Alma work, where publications can be more granular down to asset types such as journal article. And you can see that out of the box, we have the altmetric badge at the moment. So this is where Ex Libris has easily been able to develop that functionality. Ex Libris is in discussion with Elsevier for Scopus citation as well, and other metrics. So for library staff, in terms of enabling, I guess, more opportunities for the way we're doing things internally. With the change to Esploro, it's very much driving the process review internally. And what we're looking to do is devolve workflows across more teams within the library, multi-skilling staff, and really looking at reducing the point sensitivity that we've had for over 10 years with those two staff that were in the research management team. So what we've gained in terms of the library management of research outputs is very much efficient workflows. So the seamless flow from the researcher profile portal, where they have actually deposited or submitted the research outputs, comes seamlessly into Esploro Alma, where library staff can pick that up, work on that record, and then approve it. So once it's approved, it actually pushes it out automatically to the Discovery portal. So that's very much allowed us to begin eliminating some of the backlog that we had because of those challenging workflows that we had with the previous system. There's also been opportunity for us to begin improving, I guess, the library support for researchers as well as research centres. So the liaison librarians are beginning to help the researchers develop their researcher profile, and that's kicked off you know, a relationship building that's going to expand. So we also have better linkages between the library and the Office of Research. They were very much part of our implementation project. And what we've been able to do with Esploro is create logins and staff account logins for them. And they will become, as we start to review some of those workflows, they will become part of those workflows and adding and editing those records as well, both research assets and the researcher records. And again, just touching upon the analytics. So we have improved analytics for library management of those research outputs, but also for university reporting. And Ex Libris is actually working very well with, I guess, the three of us as early adopters to really develop a whole ERA suite so we can produce those reports for government. So as I'm just going to produce a few slides or go through a few slides of screenshots of the out-of-the-box analytics that have become available. So we have them in three areas. One is for the research assets, one is for research asset usage, and also for the researchers themselves. So these are just two screenshots of the dashboard for research assets. So you can see there's a number of report options there, and we can look at, for example, the number of assets by category and type, and on the right-hand side, the number of deposits. In terms of the researchers, we can see the top researchers by asset category and type, and also the top 10 researchers by published assets. So these are just some of the examples of the Esploro out-of-the-box reports and analytics that we now have access to. And lastly on the analytics is the research asset usage dashboard. So you can see this is the assets accessed in the last 30 days. The top one seems to be seagrasses of Moreton Bay. And you can see that there's also been 173 file views and downloads of that particular resource. So this has taken us from practically no analytics whatsoever to a plethora of reports that we can just quickly access. And obviously with analytics, we can design our own reports for things that we need. In terms of the integrations, so this is just some of the ones we're starting to look at. So obviously we look at the researcher load, so that's creating the researcher records. We're still building that because I guess one of the challenges that we had in our context was we didn't have some of the information, say the ORCIDs and researcher identifiers. So we're still working through that. We're looking at publishing research outputs to Google Scholar, setting up the OAI and API integrations. There's also opportunity to have an integration and a source system for grants information, which becomes informational within Esploro. Ex Libris is also working on an ORCID integration, and eventually that will become a two-way integration. And there's also obviously analytics that our Office of Research is really, really keen to look into. So us in next steps, as I said, we're working on publishing those research outputs to Data Hub, so our internal reporting via the API, and also setting up the OAI to Altmetrics, Trove, Base, etc. As I touched upon, we're really going to be starting to look at reviewing our processing, reviewing the roles and responsibilities of library staff to devolve those workflows, become more efficient. The greatest benefit, I guess, for the liaison librarians is to really expand their linkages with the researchers and academics. And that first step is actually in creation and update of profiles. And again, as I said, we had Office of Research staff very much involved in our implementation project, and we've now started to include them and involve them into our workflows with Esploro. So thank you for listening, and I'll now hand over to Keely for chapter 2.
Thank you, Meredith. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I'm part 2. And my story is about when Esploro met RMIT University Library. My role is the coordinator, Research Services Publishing. So I got on board with the research repository originally back in 2009. So this is a big change from what we had before. All right, so I thought I'd start by giving a bit of an introduction to RMIT University. We started 133 years ago as the Working Men's College in Melbourne. We are a dual sector institution these days. And over the years, we've actually merged with 6 other tertiary institutes since the 1940s, which was a lot more than what I thought we had when I actually started to look at this. We obtained university status in 1992. Our main campus is really in Swanston Street in the city in Melbourne, but we've also got a campus on Cardigan Street in Carlton. And we've also got one, oh, we've got 2 actually out at Bundoora. We've got Bundoora East and Bundoora West, and they're on either side of Plenty Road. They're probably about 10 minutes up the road from La Trobe University out there. We've also got 2 campuses in Vietnam now. So they were established in the early 2000s at the request of the Vietnamese government. So we've got one in Saigon South, and another one in Hanoi as well. A couple of years ago, we instituted our Industry Collaboration Centre in Barcelona. So we've now got some reach overseas, which is quite exciting. All right, so I guess this is kind of our size really and who we are. Looking at last year's figures anyway, we had a bit over 91,000 equivalent full-time students. And of those, we had a bit over 1,500 equivalent to full-time HDRs. And we were looking to grow those figures into this year. Our undergraduate courses, our TAFE courses, and our research all kind of focus on areas of sort of health sciences, engineering, IT, design, visual arts, architecture, business management, education, and just all sorts of sciences. So we're actually a lot broader in the sciences, and I think a lot of us actually realise, looking at our research repository, we've got a lot of different sciences that are being researched in the university. So there's a lot of work going on there. And it's great that we've got the research repository to showcase that as well. Our health sciences are quite diverse as well. I only learnt 2 years ago that we do dental assisting. I had no idea we did that. So as well as chiropractic and also nursing as well. We're quite varied in our health sciences and medical radiation. So we're kind of gaining a bit of a reputation or a bit of a foothold in the health sciences, which is really good. Now, the research repository itself launched in April 2009 after a year's work of development. I guess we received our grant from the federal government to set up our research repository in 2008. And so there was a lot of work done. There was a lot of thought put into which software to use, and there was a few options at the time. But we ended up going with the Fez Fedora option, which had been developed by the University of Queensland for their research repository. The University of Queensland did amazing things with their installation, but what we decided to do was to go with, I guess, the sort of the light version. So we went with a very simple version that I think for us really served our needs very well for a long time. And one thing that was quite kind of different for us for the research repository is that we ended up outsourcing our hosting and our tech support to a company called Catalyst IT. Catalyst had originally started up in New Zealand, and they then ended up moving to Melbourne and to Sydney, and I think they also had an office overseas at one point, I think in the UK. And they provided us with years and years of very reliable service. They were very keen to help us out, and they had to answer many curly questions with Fez Fedora, and they were really good. So we got some pretty good service out of them, which was excellent. Our records, not all, most of our records we sourced from those reported for Excellence in Research Australia that were then recorded in our Research Master instance. So that was pretty straightforward. That was an easy way of getting records into Fez Fedora, and I guess meant that we had a limited kind of set of document types, but at the beginning that was considered to be pretty good. We also ended up hosting theses as well, and these were actually added manually, and we were supplied with initially a disk and a piece of paper with a description of the actual thesis, and we just manually entered those. Now we get a notification from SAMS, and we continue to manually add those, but I guess more a bit about those later. Ultimately, we began planning for a replacement in 2017. We'd had discussions with Catalyst several years earlier about replacing Fez Fedora. And I guess we realized in 2017 that Fez Fedora, or Fez in particular, wasn't going to be developed any further. And we did quite a bit of work to sort of shore it up. We didn't know how long it would take to replace. And I guess that's when it really hit home that we were never going to be able to upgrade our version of Fedora or of our Solr indexing. We'd gone as far as we could possibly go. We were unlikely to be able to integrate with other systems out there that might help us to harvest in records. And I guess we really needed to think about starting to replace it. So I guess we got our good value out of it, which was good. So why Esploro in particular? Well, I guess there are a number of reasons. There were things that we really needed to do versus things that we really wanted to do. We really needed to integrate with existing university systems. Fez Fedora, unfortunately for us, was an island. We were not connected to any other system at all in the university. Bringing records in from Research Master was something that had to be initiated by a human being, otherwise it didn't happen. But we did have a process. We were very lucky to have someone in our research office develop some Visual Basic script that we could use to extract records from Research Master in XML format, and then we just brought them in using an FTP server. But that was just something that had to be done on a weekly basis, so that was someone's job that was done. Apart from that, if we lost all our repository stuff, it would just sit there doing not much at all. So it really needed to be integrated. We didn't have any author, well, we didn't have much author information. We had very limited author information. And for our theses, we actually had to manually create author IDs for those to go with the thesis records. So it was a system that it was on its own, and it was lonely. It needed to be connected to the rest of the university so that it could be kept up to date, which was a basic kind of a thing. We were an existing Ex Libris Alma customer. We had been since, as far as I'm aware, 2007. It might go back earlier than that. So, and we've invested in other Ex Libris products, Primo, Leganto, Rosetta, And we were early adopters for ALMA back in 2012, I think it was. So we've been through the early adopter program before, and I think, you know, our ALMA, we had existing ALMA administrators who roughly knew what to expect. Our sort of unit manager had been through the early adopter program and knew roughly what it was all about. So there were advantages for us in joining that program. And it was felt that, you know, there was an opportunity here that we could get on board with. Whereas if we'd gone with another product, it would be a fully complete product and there'd be no opportunities for any kind of feedback on what might be useful functionality or whatever. So being an existing Ex Libris customer was a big feature, I think, in our decision. We really loved the researcher customizable profiles. Our existing staff profiles are managed by 3 separate parts of the university, as far as I can gather. And researchers often ask me, how do I go about updating my profile? I want to change this, I want to change that. I don't know how to do it. How do I do it? It's hard for them to change their profile. They have to firstly work out how to place the request. It used to be that they went through their college webmaster, but now it's changed. They have to go through central ITS, and there is a special request form, but it's quite buried. It's quite hard for them to find. So I've heard the frustrations of researchers in regards to the changing of their profiles over the last few years. So I think the fact that they'll be able to get in and manage their own profiles and how they're seen to the outside world, we just looked at that and went, yes, that's definitely something that would tick all of our boxes. And I guess our other big project was we wanted to replace the Research Master for ERA reporting and for project and grant information. We'd initially asked the Research Office to come along on our journey way back in 2017, but at that stage they were intent upon upgrading their version of Research Master. Research Master hadn't been upgraded in quite a long time, so they went from a desktop version through to the latest version, which is a web version, and ultimately ended up with a product that was different from what they started with. I believe there was functionality lost, and I know they had a lot of customizations to the existing Research Master, and they were either not possible to rebuild or were very difficult to rebuild. Some loss of staff in the Research Office who had actually built those customizations didn't really help either. So they came on board later on and said, yes, we'll do this, which was great. So this is one of our sort of end goals, I guess, ultimately, is to get rid of those particular modules of Research Master. And Ex Libris have been pretty clear with us that they're very keen to get into research information management systems. So it's all looking pretty good for us, I think. Analytical reporting was a bit limited from FES Fedora. There were certain things it could give you. There was certain information that was kind of hard-coded, but to try and actually pull out any really detailed reports was very, very difficult. We kept statistics sort of manually on a spreadsheet, a couple of spreadsheets actually, and those sorts of things were very time consuming, having to perform a function and then update a spreadsheet after that. I mean, it was all very prone to sort of human error, and it wasn't really very accurate, and it wasn't detailed enough either. So we needed something better than what we had, and a bit more user-friendly than what we had as well. And I guess a bit more flexible too in the sorts of figures that we actually wanted to reveal and find out about. And harvesting. Harvesting was something that we'd been looked at for a while. Symplectic Elements made its way into the Australian market in about 2011, 2012, and that, I know, revolutionised the process for those that got onto Symplectic Elements. We thought this was wonderful, that we could have a product that would do harvesting, that had profiles, that we could use for ERA reporting, that would give us integration with university systems that we never had before, and that would give us some meaningful analytical reporting. And that was just the icing on the cake, was the harvesting. At the moment for ERA reporting, I think the Research Office does I think it's a fortnightly scrape of Scopus. I'm not quite sure. And that's really about it. For every other publication, it's a case of researchers having to manually report through a form, and they find finding the form a little bit complicated at times, although we've cleaned up many pages on the university's research sort of instructions. They can still struggle to find the form. They can still struggle to work out what they can report. So it's still very much a manual process, and I think we're all aware that we're not getting everything that is eligible for ERA. And we've also had requests over the years from researchers who want to showcase publications other than those that are ERA verifiable and yet have been peer reviewed and are considered research publications. So, and that has made complete sense. I think for the first maybe 3 or 4 years of our research repository, only having ERA publications was a good start. But after that, we really needed to grow and to expand the types of publications that we actually had in the repository. And Esploro offers so many different types of publications, we won't know ourselves when we finally turn those all on. And I guess the other thing too is that we'll be able to manage things like creative works a whole lot better than what we do now. And one day we're actually hoping to put some research data in Ex Libris. That's a plan as well. But I guess I'll get onto that later. So many reasons, but all of them about much better and more thorough functionality, I guess. All right, so the process for us started with getting staff and student information loads into Esploro, and these for us come from SAP and SAMS, so that took a while to actually work out how to format that and when to do it and how to do it, but that was our very first step, and that was really important that we did that. Our actual migration of publication records was a little bit kind of tricky, I guess. We had to migrate what we had in Fez Fedora, but we saw Research Master as the source of truth. So what we ended up doing was we decided that we would migrate those records that were already in Fez Fedora from Research Master, but with the unique fields and open access files from Fez Fedora, and combine them into one super record. And this we did, and it's worked really, really well. We've taken some older information from Fez and also from Research Master, so we've got a little bit of history for each record, and that's proven to be incredibly useful. We've already made massive use of that information, and it's meant that we've lost nothing, pretty much. I think all in all, I think I'm only really aware of a couple of records that actually got missed in the migration. One of them, we knew exactly why it was missed, and the other one's a little bit of a mystery, but I think we've managed to sort that one out. So that was a major operation in trying to work out which bits of the Research Master record, which fields of the Fez Fedora record that we actually brought in, but that's worked really, really well. So all of that was worked out before. We did a lot of mapping before we did the migration. We did more mapping after we completed the migration. I guess we did some cleansing before as well and after as well. So that was a bit of an ongoing process. And we launched on the 10th of August this year, and we only launched the research repository. So all we've done so far is done just a replace of our research repository software. And later, when we can, we'll be launching profiles, the ERA reporting, grant information, and harvesting, and they'll be for next year. We're planning to use the profiles to allow people to do their ERA reporting. So we need to get all of the configuration for Research Master done before we launch the profile, so that people can actually do that functionality. And we're an early adopter, which was really interesting. I guess normally when you go to new software, you just go to a finished product and you kind of have to map all your fields in and learn how it works, and you just move on to a new product. with us, this meant that we could actually suggest new functionality. I've had a few suggestions from researchers already, which I've passed on. These suggestions are evaluated and implemented with every monthly release of new software, and I've already had something done already, which has been fantastic. And I think this is a real feature of the early adopter program. So researchers come up with all sorts of ideas and they're really good. So being able to pass those on and being able to describe the researcher need to Esploro is very important. And I think that's a real feature of this program. Challenges. Oh, wow. Our project initially started, I guess, with the focus of replacing the research repository. We were hoping that the research office would join us from the beginning, but they didn't. They got onto it later, which was fine. And then we learned that we needed to include ITS as well, because they had a whole lot of requirements given that this software wasn't going to be hosted externally, it was going to be sort of hosted internally. ITS had a whole lot of requirements that they needed to meet as well. And that kind of complicated things because we ended up with about 5 ITS project managers throughout, which meant that we lost quite a bit of continuity at times. There were times when there were the library's requirements that didn't quite meet ITS requirements, so we had to work through what they were, what we needed, why we needed it, and it meant sometimes explaining things over and over to different ITS project managers. And our project, I think, ended up being bigger than we first thought it would be. We had a bit of a watershed moment with our 3rd ITS project manager. I guess 2 things happened there. The first one was that we actually sat down with him and we said, well, this is what we need to do. And he drew a diagram of all the things that needed to be done. And that's when he said, oh my goodness, this is way bigger than what I thought it was. That's when we started talking about splitting the project up. So we ended up identifying Part A and Part B and a minimum viable product for launch, which is what we ended up going with. So that was very important. The other thing that happened was that I felt that not everybody on the project really understood exactly what we were doing. I think there was confusion around what Research Master did and what Fez Fedora did. So that was an opportunity to clarify the fact that Research Master was not the research repository. The research repository was what was in Fez Fedora, and that we needed to take elements from both of those services in order to migrate to Esploro. So that was a really good opportunity to get that all clarified and clear, because we'd actually probably been going for not quite a year by the time that those 2 things actually happened. So it was really from that point where I think the project started to actually take form and take off, basically, which was great. Not everybody was an ALMI user. So research repository team members weren't ALMI users. And so we had to kind of learn how to use it. We're still learning how to use it, but at the same time, we're getting monthly new releases. So to a certain extent, we're all kind of on the same page now, I think. So that was a bit of a challenge. In some cases, it was a translation exercise between how do you do X function for Fez Fedora as opposed to Esploro, and I think we've kind of worked that out, and it's been great because we've been able to refine quite a lot of those as well. I said earlier we have the option of passing on suggestions to Ex Libris for new functionality or for any kind of problems that we're up against, and we use a service run by the Salesforce program. My kind of issue with that is that it can take quite a long time for these issues to be addressed. I don't know, I guess it's part of building a new service, not just maintaining a new service. I've got quite a lot of jobs in, I know other people have as well, but it can take a long time. It can take 4 weeks for something to be addressed in the first instance, and I know that things will be set up so that they can come out in monthly releases, but it does seem to take a bit longer than what I would prefer, I think. So my recommendations for the whole thing: have a clear set of goals for the project, know what needs to be done, and make sure everybody is clear. Have periodic reviews where you do actually talk about what's changed and what you need to do now. and know what your short and your long-term goals are. Clearly communicate your needs to ex-Libris. They are interested, they want to know. They've asked me all sorts of questions. They've grilled me on certain things, which has been wonderful. So they are very keen to understand their requirements. So I think talking to them as much as possible is really important. And lastly, celebrate your successes, because I think a software migration is a major task, and we're all moving into a new and bright and very exciting future. We certainly are here at RMIT. We've got a lot to look forward to, and I think it's been pretty amazing, and I'm looking forward to next year when we can open up a few more parts of the Esploro product. So now I will stop sharing my screen and I will pass on to Margie.
Hi everyone, I'm going to fly through this as quickly as possible so that we get time for the questions. So without further ado, the outline of this, I'm Margie Pembroke, Library Systems and Copyright Librarian at Southern Cross University. I'm going to tell you a bit about Southern Cross, the scope of our Esploro implementation, which is very different to USC and RMIT in that we were only replacing our repository. I'll talk about our drivers for adopting the new repository, the change management tactics we adopted, and how we managed our stakeholders. I'll finish off with some tips and tricks. And if we get time after questions, a quick demo of the research deposit process. So Southern Cross is a multi-campus regional university on the east coast of Australia. We've got 3 main campuses located at Coffs Harbour, Lismore and Gold Coast. And that covers about 300 kilometres from the forest to the sea of the east coast of Australia. There are also teaching sites at Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, and 3 hotel schools in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. And our region boasts a great deal of natural beauty and ecological diversity, and our research centres reflect this. We have research centres in marine biology, ecology, organic agriculture, natural medicine, plant and geoscience, flood mitigation, forest science, and a centre for children and young people. We are ranked in the world top 150 universities under the age of 50, so we're young and dynamic, and that's by the Times Higher Education World University Campus. We achieved a well above world standard in 14 research fields and at world standard for a further 23. So for a relatively young university, we punched well above our weight. That's a quick glimpse of our campuses. So Coffs Harbour was first, then Lismore, and the waves of Kirra Beach in the background of Gold Coast campus. So the scope of our repository, we were replacing our existing institutional repository, the Digital Commons e-publications, with both the profiles and the repository. Unlike Keely and Meredith, we were not looking to replace our research management system, but we were wanting to be able to export data to the Office of Research and replace our existing OAI PMH exports to Research Data Australia and Libraries Australia. Once the Office of Research had seen the system, they realised there was potential to replace their existing research publication submission process, which was entirely manual and relied on the researcher completing a PDF form with the online submission form on the profile, supplemented by auto-harvesting. This provided a platform in Esploro to grab all the publications data in a much easier way. Scheduled reports can also be provided to the heads of school, the research centres and the Office of Research from Alma Analytics. And we also wanted to implement an ingest of data from the Southern Cross HR system combined with identifiers that were stored in our technology services data warehouse to automatically give access to the researcher profiles to Southern Cross staff. So those identifiers were the Scopus ID and the researcher ID coming off the ORCID profile. So the data warehouse sort of brought all that information in together. Our drivers were technological and aesthetic. So Esploro represents an integrated next generation repository system that leverages off the existing library management system, ALMA. So our drivers were both, as I said, technological and aesthetic. Our Digital Commons repository was not integrated with any other Southern Cross system and provided little to no integration points. Esploro provides integrations with data sites so we can mint DOIs from within the system. Previously, all our DOIs were manually minted. An integration with ORCID ID is on the roadmap, and that will be a two-way integration. And that's going to save the researchers and our staff so much time in data entry. And that's just putting aside the auto harvesting, which we are, Southern Cross is currently testing in beta. So we've done probably about 4 or 5 harvests of individual researchers into our sandbox at the moment. And obviously aesthetically, the look and feel of this system is 10 times better than what we had. The change management, challenges as always. Change as always provides challenges and opportunities. And even though we thought we had communicated clearly the capacity of the APIs to generate research profile data on the website, marketing were keen to push ahead with a website upgrade that focused on academic profiles. They subsequently requested that staff make sure that their research profile was up to date, but pointed them to the old system about a week before we were launching the profiles. A challenge indeed. We were able to leverage off the website upgrade after a few phone calls, manic phone calls and emails. So we began targeting the academic and research units that were next on the marketing's upgrade list. So that was one challenge. Populating the profiles provided challenging and provided it proved challenging as well. So getting researchers to engage with the system. We've had several comments around the number of profiles that researchers have. So Google Scholar, ORCID, ResearchGate, academia.edu, etc. So some considered this one more place that they had to maintain a profile. We've been pushing the ORCID integration as a selling point. So we chose, as we implemented a group of approximately 65 high-profile researchers and populated their profiles for them, using them as exemplars. And at the very beginning of the project, I said to expect the unexpected. I think I said that at Igloo. But I don't think anyone could have predicted a global pandemic. The impacts on the university sector in Australia, and that we would be working remotely for the majority of 2020. We actually launched from lockdown, which meant instead of an afternoon tea with obligatory champagne, Kate, you would have missed out on that too, it was a Zoom meeting with a virtual ribbon cutting. I did pour a glass of champagne afterwards though. The project resulted in a much stronger collaborative relationship with the Office of Research, and we're able to reinforce the position of the library as the metadata experts of the university. However, the greatest benefit has been the ability to influence the development of this product and provide feedback with regard to functionality and improvements, as both Keely and Meredith have touched upon. So our stakeholders were obviously the researchers who we conducted focus groups with. We didn't show them Esploro, but we asked them what they would like to see in a research profile system, then showed them some of the other systems that shall remain nameless, and asked the researchers what they liked and didn't like. The Office of Research attended the initial on-site meeting with Ex Libris in 2018, and we endeavoured to keep them updated throughout the implementation process, giving them demonstrations of the sandbox and the functionality as it came on board. Marketing was a little bit more challenging, as I previously mentioned, but my tip is to engage with them early and often. Make sure that you're speaking the same language, which we weren't. I was banging on about APIs and they were talking marketing speak, which I don't understand either. We took a top-down and bottom-up approach with them, with me talking to the website developers who did know what an API was, and the library director and I attending the online steering committee meeting, which is a meeting that addresses the whole of Southern Cross website. So the message is engage and engage again. Technology services are actually the glue that stick all this together. They have the developers to produce the researcher load, they have the developers to create the APIs, and they are the keepers of the keys to the Southern Cross data warehouse. So they have been fantastic and they've been on board from the very beginning. Tips and tricks, we had our amazing Maureen Besançon created an interactive LibWizard tutorial in SpringShare to help people walk through the update of their profile and request that that profile be made live. And I can't stress enough that you need to engage your stakeholders early and often to keep them engaged with the project. Always expect the unexpected, but I think everyone learnt that lesson in 2020. reach out to the ALMA and Esploro community. We have a group of Australian early adopters that meet monthly, quite informally, to discuss their experiences. And when you're implementing, find champions and encourage them to spread the word. Promote the system from the top down, bottom up, and everything in between. Provide feedback to Ex Libris. As Keely said, they are keen to hear what we want. We've all taken part in one-on-one meetings to discuss what functionality we would like to see in the portal, what fields we'd like to see for projects, grants, and what assets fields we'd like to see. We've had the opportunity to discuss our pain points and see resolutions being developed. So to the questions, I hope that wasn't too rushed.
That's great. You guys are going to moderate the questions yourselves, aren't you?
Okay.
Thanks. And I think, Margie, we do have time after the questions. If you want to do your demo, people can stay on and watch, and we'll capture it in the recording. Would be great. Okay, cool. That'd be good. That's given that the internet in Ballina stays stable, which I think it is, and my dog Bee's quiet. With that, I was chatting with Meredith. So, Kendall, I'll answer your question really quickly. The answer is yes, we have research data in the repository already. We migrated that from our system. The Esploro metadata set, schema, is so much more comprehensive than what we were currently working with in our migration from, in our OAI PMH harvest from Digital Commons to ARDC, and it's nearly mapped already. So I've just got to get back in touch with Melanie Barlow, who was on leave, and that is pretty much done and dusted. And Simon, which ties in with Kendall's question as well. So how good is Esploro managing deposit of open access? The answer is bloody fantastic, to speak Australian at that. You can attach several different what are called representations, I suppose, in Alma Digital to one asset, and sorry, somebody's knocking at the door, of course. So, and each of those different representations can have different access rights applied to them. So that means that you can have the publisher version sitting against that metadata, and it will have restricted access. You can have the researcher version preprint sitting with open access. You can have the open access version sitting with whichever Creative Commons license you would like to apply to it. So it is incredibly easy, and to link that to the researcher profile is just a matter of, on the asset, you toggle the button that says display in profile, and that automatically makes that item display on the actual profile of that person. It's incredibly easy to manage, and all from within the back end. Meredith, would you like me just to keep going through the questions, or yeah, okay. Does that answer your question? I hope so, Simon. Lauren, the metadata schema is an internal Esploro schema. It's really, really rich is all I can say, but I was coming from a very low base. So I don't know if Keely would be able to concur with me on that, but you actually, yeah, it's a lot richer. Flexibility, not sure I can answer that. And do we have any examples of what the records actually look like in Alma? If I get a chance to do the online demo, I can show you what the back end looks like, and you can get a look at what fields are there. I might even be able to pull up the export to Research Data Australia, but we'll see. Christine, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question about counter compliance with the data. We'd have to ask Ex Libris. And is there a data repository option in Esploro to upload files that you don't want to make publicly accessible in any way?
Yes, that's what I was talking about when I answered Simon's question. So you can have one, you can have the publisher version attached to the asset as a restricted access version. I know that RMIT are working on Esploro for their ERA reporting. So those requirements for ERA as far as migrating to SEER and exporting the records to SEER will be met by them. We are not replacing our research management system at Southern Cross. We are just feeding our metadata through to the Office of Research. So it's a little bit of a different implementation. Did we make it with 2 minutes over? So if that answers everyone's questions, I can do a very, very quick demonstration of the research portal and a quick look at the back end if you would like. Is that okay, Kate?
Yes, yes, Margie, that's fine. And anyone who needs to can leave but capture it when we have the recording available. So, yep, go for it.
So to pick up the right screen, and I'll move them over there. Okay, so this is the landing page of the researcher profiles. And you can see that I'm automatically logged in via single sign-on in the production environment. We haven't actually enabled that in our sandbox, but this is the sandbox. I'm just double checking that before I deposit something. If I wanted to deposit something, I would just say, well, what am I depositing? It's a journal article. And here's the DOI that I prepared earlier. Oops, not that one. This one, maybe, yeah. Oh. Control C. Sorry. And you can see the system going off and finding the metadata for that DOI. It will take a little while because it's sandbox and it's right on lunchtime. It's always a little bit quieter. So you can see that the deposit comes in, and yes, that's the one we want. If I wanted to put the file in, I could just navigate to that by selecting the file and dragging and dropping it. You can see that the DOI link is there. I'm not going to drop it because it's time consuming. We go through to describe it. You can see all the fields that have automatically migrated. If you wanted to add your FOR and SEO codes, you could add them in there. You can enter other keywords if you wanted to. And also the types of activity as far as SEO are actually added in a table in the back end. One thing that it doesn't do well is when you are the depositor, it puts you first. So you do have to move that around. It brings the abstract over, and you can see that all the required fields are highlighted. Publication status is all in here. There has been a little bit of an issue with this field, but this is only the deposit from the researcher end. This comes into the back end and library staff then tidy the record up. You can see any relations. So if this had been part of a grant, I could actually search for that grant within our system and attach that grant. And there is on the roadmap, one of the tabs on the profile is going to be grants. One of the things that we've asked for is to be able to then click on the grant and see all the publications that are associated with that grant, which will be really nice. We then go to review. I'm going to say yes. It was me, I really did do it. And I'm going to submit that publication. So it then tells me it's successful. So looking at a researcher live, you can see that these are all now live links as well to their research identifiers. You can email that researcher. This information you can now choose to display or not. Our phone numbers, we've set a default to not display mobile numbers, so that needs to be toggled in the back end if they are going to display their mobile, and some people do, believe it or not. You can see that the biography and expertise, so these fields are what Maureen set up, so the biography, research and other. They're what we've put in, they're what is in the research LibWizard tutorial, and we've asked them to fill in up to 50 words on each. And then when you go through to the research outputs, you can see that they are organised by the greatest to the least, and altmetric is displaying. If you click on one of them, you come through into the portal, and it was a bit slow this morning, but that's a bit better. And that one is linking straight to the DOI out to that article. You've got your altmetrics and the full metadata of that record. So if I go into the back end and back to the dashboard, you can see in my task list, which is still loading. It's a lovely day in Ballina, that there is actually just one research deposit, and I'll go in, and that's the deposit that I just put through. So if we click on that, and I'll answer Daniela's query as we go. So there is the deposit. There's all the fields that you can add in. They've actually just implemented handles as well as DOI integration. There's a Sherpa Romeo integration. So if we were to go through to that item in Sherpa Romeo, it will give you the access rights, which is really useful when staff are depositing. You can see the access rights and license at the asset level. So for this asset in particular, because it is open access, it's published under a CC license in an open access journal, we can apply the license at the level of the asset rather than the level of the actual deposit. So if I were to add a file in here, and this is the sandbox, so I will just add anything. That one. And it's actually going very slowly. I just wanted to show you the access rights that you apply at the asset level. It's going really, really slowly. Sorry. Actually, I'll go into another one, and that might be. No, I think my internet is going to not want to play with that. So if I were to prove that, that is live automatically. So the sandbox is a tad slow, and my apologies for that. Things that you should never do in an online presentation, I suppose. And this is an email, we've currently got it switched off to send through to the researcher and any affiliated researchers that that asset has actually been deposited. There's a version of this for the harvest as well. So you can sort of keep the researchers aware of what's happened. We have it switched off because we're adding so many things at the moment. We didn't want to spam our researchers.
We probably need to wrap it up there, Margie. So okay. I'm just aware some people have got some other meetings within the break between the next session. Yeah. So I just want to thank all three of our panelists, Meredith, Margie and Keely. Really, really interesting to see how you're using Esploro and the processes around implementation, and it's a great opportunity to engage with stakeholders, researchers, research office this is very exciting to me, and I think
Yeah.
with the questions, there's a lot of interest. So thank you. And the demo it's really good to see it actually, not in the abstract, but working.
And anyone who I didn't get to the question, feel free to email us offline as well to any of us, because there are answers to your questions. So yeah, thank you, Kate. And so sorry we didn't catch up and catch a bus together.
Yes, and virtual champagne is just not the same. So anyway, thank you very much on behalf of the audience.